Hello, everybody. My name is Dingo. I'm a hobbyist UK happy hardcore producer from the Bay Area, and I'm coming here with a video regarding my workflow. So, I wanted to provide a video about workflow to be able to give a head start to producers who are starting out, whether you are a UK happy hardcore producer or not. I hope to give you some of my perspective after having produced for 3 years. And be able to just, give you that head start that you could use to learn everything that I have in terms of workflow at a much quicker pace. That's sort of my intention with this video. So let's go ahead and begin with a premise. So it takes me about a month to make a track when I'm on vacation, and it takes me when I'm working or studying about 2 to 3 months at most. So when I start, I often take a dedicated day to do the following tasks. So first, I tend to create a basic chord and a melody using a basic piano generator. And I used to use FL Keys. I'm currently using the Korg M1. So this is what I was sort of sounding like. I made a bootleg of Chocolate Rain. So what I did was I took some of the main piano melody, put it through Edison, and pretty much just got the MIDI from there. And then I looked up a website to get the chords and then made a variation of the chords from there. So this is what it sounds like. So then what I did was I went to the track and I listened pretty carefully and looked up some Synthesia playthroughs to be able to get a visual reference as well. And I got to figuring out the vocal MIDI, which sounds like this. So let me just go ahead and unmute the vocals for you so you can hear them.
Chocolate rain. Chocolate rain.
And this here is the second phrase, but I didn't include it here.
Chocolate rain.
So that's what it sounds like. And during this phase, I actually didn't put any effect on it. I've only set levels because I sort of leave the mixing phase to a separate stage of my workflow. So all this was just with a dry Korg M1 piano, no effects, nothing. And then I work up the melody. I'm going to go ahead and mute the vocals for this one in particular. And so that's sort of my variation of it. So I take a day to sort of figure out the layout of the basic groundwork. The reason it looks like this, though, is because I was thinking of making a breakbeat hardcore variation of the song, but it sort of fell through because I had other ideas. And those other ideas took a little bit more priority because I was in collaborations with other users at the time. Although I probably might come back to this and just make a breakbeat hardcore variation just for fun. So back onto topic. After that, spending a day just creating a basic chord and melody stuff with the basic piano generator, I then spend a day creating a basic drop skeleton with only the level set, no mixing done. So right here, chorus 1 was the sort of basic drop skeleton that I came up with. And so what I did was I laid out some basic drums, corresponding percussion, some bass, and then the leads. I didn't really include this piano here, and I did not include the effects because I usually put the effects in during my arrangement phase, which I'll get to in a bit. So what goes on here is I just figure out what presets to use and figuring out like the bass lines and all that jazz. I still figured that stuff out if I hadn't already laid it out with the piano stage that I mentioned earlier. So I figure out the presets that I want to use. I don't necessarily do my sound design inside of the project. I tend to keep my sound design session separate, and then I just cycle through presets looking for what I think fits the track. Although I think in this particular case, none of the presets were entertaining me enough. I wasn't feeling them, so I just ended up making a new bass from scratch. Same thing happened here. I just selected presets, and that pretty much explains my sort of first 2 days of workflow. I then spend the rest of the week or just like a week in general to creating the arrangement of the track, just setting the levels in mono, and then after that doing some sort of work in terms of automations for the sake of the arrangement. So things like filtration to ease into transitions there, as you can see, or just to make sure that like one element gets accentuated while the other one is meant, or I intend for another one to be sort of at the forefront of the mix. So it's like very light mixing. It's not really like dedicated actual making things, mesh together in glue sort of mixing. So that from there, after I spend a week figuring out the arrangement, I then spend the following week mixing it by groups. So what I tend to do is I tend to take a bottom-up approach here, where I mix the effects first, then the vocals, then the lead, then the breakdown, then the bass line, then the drum mix. The reason I do this is because I actually end up using P controllers for my breakdowns because they're irregular drum rhythms where the kick isn't necessarily playing 4/4 or 4 to the floor. And this creates sort of problems because if I were to mix the drums first, I tend to consolidate my groups after I mix them. So then I would consolidate it, and the P controller wouldn't be doing any work when I'm trying to simulate some side chain for the other groups. So I wasn't really hearing what the sidechain envelope I would set up is doing. So then what I chose to do instead is to mix it from a bottom-up approach, so I can actually hear what the P controller is doing during those breakdowns. And that's pretty much it from there. So just to remind you, I tend to take a bottom-up approach. So I mix the effects, then the vocals, then the lead, then the breakdown, then the bass line, then the drum mix. And how I go about doing it is that I spend a day doing it. So 1 day per group. So 1 day for the effects, 1 day for the vocals, so on, so forth. And doing this, I do this for 2-hour sessions at most. So I spend at most 2 hours mixing a group, and I take frequent breaks. So every 30 minutes or so, I'll take a 15-minute break so I can just chill out with my ears because I tend to use headphones for mixing. I don't have access to good acoustic treatment or a decent set of monitors quite yet. I mainly use like the monitors or the basic speakers that I have to lay out the arrangement. So that's that. After I spend a week mixing the track, what I tend to do is I submit it over to some online forums to get some feedback on it, on how I could improve the mix and the arrangement. And during that time when I'm waiting on feedback, I like to take a break. I try to avoid this track as much as I can in terms of the DAW. And what I actually do is I go onto the internet and I figure out what images I want to use for my album art and my visualizer and work it from there. Just like gathering all the related media for the release. So thumbnails for YouTube, album arts, lyrics in case that there are lyrics and I want to put it on Bandcamp or over on my distributor. I have to like put lyrics for songs that do have lyrics for it to have a better chance of transcribing better in streaming services like Apple Music, TikTok, the works. And so that's what I spend that week doing. And then the following week, I take the feedback that I got. I spend a week tweaking it based on that feedback, the project, and I master it. And then from there, after I spend the week just tweaking it and mastering it, the following week is just spent on releasing it, or any extra time I might need for one of the tasks I mentioned throughout this video. So it's roughly a 3-week schedule-ish, but 4 weeks is 4 to 5 weeks. So, around a month. When I'm on vacation, I tend to take a bit longer. So I tend to take like 2 weeks for each of these tasks because I'm pretty busy when I'm in school or at work. So that's that. So I hope that this video is able to help those of you guys that are starting out. And I'd appreciate it if you had any ideas of your own that you could contribute, that you could also just comment it. Feel free to leave some feedback over in the comments below, thinking about ways that you think you could improve this or how it would translate. If you have any questions for me, I'll do my best to answer them. And then if you didn't like this video, well, at the very least, I hope you learn a little something, a little trick, so to speak. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's pretty much the long and short of my workflow as of that's my most sort of recent implementation of my workflow as of the past 3 years, or as a result of the past 3 years. So that's pretty much it, and I'll see you in the next tutorial video.